Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to share with you the difficult, scarce and challenging days of Huyen and her mother trying to make a living. Huyen gently holds baby Micah in her arms, quietly crossing from one hill to another. The rugged dirt road covered with weeds and stones makes each step heavier for her, but her embrace remains steady and warm. The early morning in the forest is filled only with the singing of birds and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Occasionally, Huyen stops to observe the bamboo bushes, the stream banks, or the large tree roots, hoping to find some crabs, snails, clams, or other natural products to sell at the market for extra money. Micah obediently rests her head on her mother and Appo's shoulder, her small eyes curious as she gazes at the lush mountains. Seeing her tired, Huyen gently pats her back and softly says, and quote, "Hang in there a little longer, my dear, and then we will go home," end quote. Despite having to cross many hills and long roads, Huyen never complains. In her heart, she only has a simple wish: to earn enough money so that their meals are more filling and Micah can grow up in her loving arms. In front of us lies a vast lotus pond nestled at the foot of a green rocky mountain. After a long journey across many hills and mountains, Huyen stops by the pond to rest. She gently bends down, lifts baby Micah from her hands, and places her on the old stone step by the water and Appo's edge. Micah curiously looks at the lush green lotus leaves covering the surface of the pond. The pink lotus flowers sway gently in the light breeze, making the girl excited, and she points forward. Huyen smiles, adjusts her child in Appo's hat, then sits down beside her, wiping the sweat still on her forehead after the long journey. The mother and daughter quietly admire the peaceful lotus pond. The sounds of forest birds echo from the mountainside, and the wind blowing through the trees blends with the faint fragrance of lotus, making the scene truly tranquil. After a few minutes to rest and regain strength, Huyen looks toward the lotus pond, hoping that this place will help her find some fish, snails, or natural products to sell at the market, earning extra money to support their lives. Huyen gently sat down in front of little Micah, softly stroked her hair, and tenderly advised, and quote, "Sit still here, absolutely do not go near the water and Appo's edge on your own. Just sit on the stone steps and wait for me. I and Appo's I'll come back as soon as I finish." End quote. Micah obediently nodded, tightly holding her small hat in her hand, and sat quietly watching her mother's shadow. Seeing that her child was sitting safely, Huyen felt reassured and stood up, placing the bamboo basket aside before slowly walking toward the lotus pond. Approaching the water's edge, she bent down, rolled up her sleeves carefully, and rolled her pants above her knees to make it easier to wade in. Her bare feet touched the cool water as Huyen took slow steps, her eyes attentively observing beneath the green lotus leaves, hoping to find some snails, a few crabs, or clams to sell at the market for extra money. Huyen slowly waded through the shallow water, bending over to gently part the grass and soft mud beneath her feet. Her hands skillfully searched, her focused eyes not missing any signs. Suddenly, Huyen smiled when she discovered a few clams hidden among the sand and mud. She quickly bent down, gently picking each one up, shaking off the mud, and carefully placing them into the basket she carried. The shells softly clinked against each other in the quiet space of the lotus pond. With the first clams in hand, Huyen and Appo's hope grew stronger. She continued along the water and Appo's edge, patiently searching little by little. On the shore, little Micah suddenly burst into tears. The girl kept looking around, then raised her hands towards her mother, as if afraid to sit alone in the vast and quiet lotus pond. Hearing her child and Appo's crying, Huyen immediately put down the basket and hurriedly waded to the shore. She bent down, picked up Micah into her arms, gently patted her back, and softly comforted her. End quote. "Mom is here, Micah, Don and Appo's. Be afraid," end quote. With her mother holding her, the girl gradually stopped crying but still clung tightly to her mother and Appo's neck, refusing to let go. Huyen looked at her child with love and then decided to carry Micah closer to the water and Appo's edge, choosing a shallow, flat, and solid patch of ground. She placed the child on the grass right near the shore, bent down to adjust the hat, and gently said, "You are only allowed to stand here, absolutely not to step into the water or go into the deep areas. If you want to find Mom, just call out loudly. Mom is always right beside you." Micah obediently nodded, her small hand still clutching her mother and Appo's shirt. Only when she saw that her child had calmed down and was standing in a safe place did Huyen bend down again to continue searching for clams in the shallow water near the shore, occasionally turning her head to look at her child and smiling to reassure Micah that she was always very close. Huyen gently smiled when she saw Micah had calmed down. She once again bent down, rolled up her sleeves, and continued to crouch, searching for clams in the shallow water by the lotus pond. Her hands skillfully sifted through the mud and sand. Every time she found a clam, she carefully placed it into the bamboo basket beside her. Micah stood right at the water and Appo's edge as her mother instructed, her big eyes focused intently on each of Huyen and Appo's movements. Seeing her mother walking slowly ahead, the girl tiptoed along the shallow ground, always keeping a very close distance to her mother. Sometimes Micah would point down to the water surface chirping "Mom, look there, and Appo's something over there." Huyen looked up and smiled gently, replying, "Just stand still on the shore, let me check." Then she approached to examine. Sometimes it was just an old lotus leaf. Other times it was a few small clams buried in the mud. The mother and daughter continued slowly along the edge of the pond, Huyen always keeping an eye on Micah, making sure she didn't and Appo's go near the deep water, working while softly chatting so that her daughter wouldn't and Appo's feel scared or lonely anymore. Huyen saw that the shallow water near the shore had been mostly explored, so she carefully waded a few more steps into a slightly deeper area where the water only reached her waist. She moved very slowly to maintain her balance, her eyes focused on the mud beneath her feet and the gaps between the lotus bushes. Micah still obediently stood on the shallow ground as her mother had instructed. The girl curiously bent down, using her small hands to gently flip a layer of soft mud. Then suddenly exclaimed with delight, "Mom! Mom! I see it!" In Micah and Appo's hand was a fairly large clam, still a bit muddy. The girl smiled brightly, holding it up high to show her mother as if she had just found a small treasure. Hearing her child and Appo's call, Huyen turned around and smiled warmly. "Very good. My Micah is so clever." Incited by her mother and Appo's praise, Micah carefully hugged the clam and ran to the bamboo basket, gently placing it inside, then happily looked at her mother to continue working. Huyen kept a close eye on her, occasionally raising her head to check if Micah was still in a safe spot. Then she could continue bending down to search for clams among the lotus pond. Huyen still quietly toiled among the lotus pond, bending over and then gently turning over layers of mud and sand beneath the clear water. Every time she found a clam, she carefully rinsed it and placed it into the bamboo basket that was gradually getting heavier. Near the water and Appo's edge, Micah found a flat stone protruding above the water surface and obediently sat down there. The little girl gently swung her small legs, her bright eyes focused intently on her mother and Appo's basket. Each time Huyen added a clam to the basket, Micah happily counted in her childish voice, "1, 2, 4." Sometimes she counted up to 5 and then forgot, giggling softly and starting to count again from the beginning. Micah and Appo's clear laughter echoed through the peaceful lotus pond, making Huyen smile as well, all her fatigue seeming to fade away a little. Occasionally, Huyen would lift her head to look at her child and gently remind her, "Micah, remember to sit still on the rock, Don and Appo's go down to the deep area on your own." The girl obediently nodded, holding her small basket with both hands, continuing to eagerly count each clam her mother had worked hard to find, as if cherishing the precious gifts of the mother and daughter on a peaceful morning amidst the lotus pond. After patiently searching for a while, Huyen looked around the pond and exhaled softly. The bamboo basket already had some clams, but the areas along the shore she just passed through almost had nothing left. She gently brushed off the last layer of mud, smiled and shook her head, then decided to find another place. Huyen waded ashore, washed her hands and feet, which were still muddy under the clear water. She carried the bamboo basket up to check, carefully arranged the clam she had just caught, then bent down to hold Micah in her arms. Micah wrapped her arms around her mother and Appo's neck and curiously asked, "Mom, where are we going?" Huyen smiled gently and gently stroked her child and Appo's head. "Mom and I are going to find a new place. Maybe there are more clams there." Saying that, she put her conical hat back on, held Micah tightly in her arms, and slowly walked along the small path around the lotus pond. Mother and daughter passed through green bushes, wildflowers swaying in the wind, and shady trees, quietly admiring the peaceful scenery of the mountains and forests. Although the road ahead was still long and uncertain what they would find, Huyen remained steadfast in each step, following a winding trail through the mountains. As they go further, the terrain becomes more treacherous with numerous large rocks piled on top of each other, and the path is just wide enough for one person to squeeze through. Huyen tightly holds baby Micah in her arms, one hand embracing her child, while the other grips onto rocks to keep her balance. Every step she takes is extremely cautious, her eyes always carefully observing ahead to avoid slippery spots or jagged rocks. Micah obediently snuggles close to her mother's chest, her small arms wrapping around Huyen's neck. The girl softly whispers and quote, "Mommy, I'm holding you very tight." End quote. Huyen smiles gently and responds and quote, "Just hold me like that and let's go slowly." End quote. After overcoming many large rocks and steep paths, the mother and daughter saw a different lotus pond nestled between towering cliffs. The clear water surface was covered with lush green lotus leaves, with a few pink lotuses gently swaying in the wind, creating a scene that was both peaceful and majestic. Standing on the rocky ledge looking down at the pond, Huyen took a deep breath and gently tightened her arms around Micah. She carefully searched for a safe way down among the rocks, moving slowly and cautiously, always keeping her child close to ensure safety. In the quiet space of the mountains and forests, only the sound of the wind blowing through the cliffs and the footsteps of the young mother trying to find a glimmer of hope for their lives remained. Following the rugged rocks, Huyen finally found a flat patch of land nestled beneath the cliff. She gently knelt down, sat baby Micah on a dry stone, and adjusted her hat. Huyen sat down at eye level with Micah and gently said and quote, "Sit here, okay? Don and Appo's tea run away. Mom just needs to go back and get the bamboo basket, and she and Appo's. I'll be right back." End quote. Micah obediently nodded, her small hands hugging her knees, her eyes always following her mother. Seeing that her child was seated securely in a safe spot, Huyen smiled softly and carefully turned around, weaving through the cracks in the rocks. Her steps were slow and steady to avoid slipping. After a moment, she reached the place where she had left the bamboo basket, bent down to lift it up, and lightly brushed off the dust on the outside. Before returning, Huyen still couldn't and Appo's helped but turn her head to look at Micah. From afar, the girl was still sitting quietly on a stone slab, her small legs swinging gently and smiling when she saw her mother returning. Seeing her child safe and sound, Huyen felt reassured and carefully held the woven basket in her hand, stepping over each stone to return to Micah. Huyen crouched along the edge of the cliff, skillfully observing each small crevice. After a moment, she discovered a crab hiding under a damp rock. She gently caught it with her hand and smiled as she brought it towards Micah. End quote. "Look, I caught a crab." End quote. Micah curiously looked but immediately retracted her hand and hid behind her mother when she saw the two claws raised, her eyes showing fear. Seeing this, Huyen gently reassured her and carefully handled the crab to avoid pinching Micah. After ensuring there was no danger, she brought the crab closer for her to observe. This time, Micah gathered her courage and extended her small hand to receive it. The girl looked at the crab with delight, occasionally giggling at its funny appearance. Huyen carefully carried Micah across the rugged rocks, slowly searching for a flatter spot to rest. Reaching a wide, dry slab of stone under the shade of a tree, she gently bent down to sit the child down. But as soon as she released her from her embrace, Micah quickly clung tightly to Huyen and Apos' neck. Her eyes were red and teary, constantly shaking her head as if afraid of something, refusing to sit down alone. Huyen softly stroked her soft hair and asked gently and quote, "Are you scared, Micah? Mom is here, it and Apos' okay." End quote. However, the girl still clung tightly to her mother, her small hands gripping Huyen and Apos' shoulders and refusing to let go. Seeing this, Huyen simply smiled tenderly, not forcing her anymore. She sat down on the stone slab, gently holding Micah in her arms so the girl could rest her head on her chest. A gentle breeze passes by, but the sunlight in the mountains remains quite hot. Huyen immediately took off her conical hat, held it in her hand, and slowly fanned Micah gently. Each slow and gentle fan stroke carried a bit of cool breeze to dispel the heat and help the girl feel calmer. Micah snuggled close to her mother, her eyes gradually closing, her small hand still clutching her shirt as if unwilling to let go. Huyen softly smiled, holding her child while gazing out at the distant lotus pond, quietly resting for a moment before continuing the journey of livelihood for the two of them. Huyen looked around for a moment and then chose a dry, flat stone under the shade of a tree. She took off her conical hat and gently placed it on the stone to serve as a seat for Micah. End quote. "Sit here, it's cooler." End quote. Micah obediently sat on her mother's hat, her small legs swinging gently, her face still a little tired from the long journey over the hills. Huyen opened the cloth bag she had brought from the morning, took out a boiled egg she had prepared earlier, and smiled as she handed it to her. End quote. "Eat this to get some energy." End quote. Micah's eyes lit up with delight. Carefully she took the egg, using her tiny fingers to peel off the shell slowly. The white shell peeled away little by little, revealing the fragrant, warm egg inside. After peeling, Micah took a big bite and then looked up at her mother with a wide smile. Occasionally, she held up the egg as if to show her mother that she was eating very happily. Huyen gently instructed Micah to sit still on the conical hat, then carefully carried the bamboo basket towards the waterlogged rocks. She took each step very slowly, her feet carefully testing each spot to avoid slipping on the moss and wet stones. When she reached the spot where clear water seeped through the cracks in the rocks, Huyen bent down, gently using her hand to turn over the thin layer of sand and mud at the bottom. Her eyes carefully observed every small corner, not missing any signs. After a moment, her fingertips touched a hard object hidden beneath the sand. Huyen smiled softly, skillfully scooping it up. It was a fairly large clam. She quickly shook off the mud and placed it into the bamboo basket. Continuing along the cracks in the rocks, Huyen found a few more clams. Each time she discovered a clam, her hands moved swiftly to pick it up, the shells softly clinking together inside the small basket. After patiently searching between the water-filled crevices in the rocks, Huyen and Apos' bamboo basket was also filled with quite a few large and small clams. She stood upright, gently wiped the sweat from her forehead, and smiled lightly in relief because her efforts had finally paid off. Huyen carefully gathered all the clams, took them to a clear water spot by the edge of the rocks, and gently washed each handful. The mud and dirt gradually washed away with the flowing water, revealing the shiny clamshells sparkling under the sunlight. After washing them clean, she lifted the basket to drain the water, and then slowly poured all the clams into her carried bamboo basket. The sound of the clams clinking against each other rang out, signaling a quite successful search. Micah curiously ran over, looked into the basket and exclaimed with delight, end quote, "Oh Mom, so many clams!" End quote. Huyen chuckled gently, reached out to softly stroke her child and Appo's hair and said tenderly, end quote, "Maybe today we will sell enough to buy rice and some better food," end quote. Hearing that, Micah happily hugged her mother and Appo's arm, her eyes sparkling with joy. Amidst the quiet mountains and forests, the mother and child looked at the bamboo basket, now heavier than before, and a little hope for the days ahead blossomed in their hearts. Bending down by the clear stream, Huyen gently washed her muddy hands and then cleaned her feet that were covered in dirt after a whole afternoon of wading through the pond and squeezing through rocky crevices. The cool water washed away the dirt, revealing her feet that had turned red from walking so much. After washing herself, Huyen turned to the shore, picked up Micah into her arms, and slowly lowered her into the shallow water. She always held her very tightly, one arm around her back, and the other gently pouring small amounts of water over her tiny hands. Micah obediently extended her small hands for her mother to wash. Huyen carefully cleaned each finger, then gently washed her little feet, being careful not to splash water on her face to avoid startling her. The cool water delighted Micah, who giggled softly and playfully splashed the small waves under her feet. Huyen smiled as she looked at her, gently stroked her hair, and carried Micah back to the shore, using a small towel she brought to dry her hands and feet carefully before continuing their journey. Huyen carefully bent down and carried the woven basket full of clams onto her back. The basket, though not very large, had become heavy after a whole afternoon of diligent searching. She gently adjusted the strap to secure it and then turned to smile at Micah. Gently holding her child in her arms, Huyen took slow steps to leave the lotus pond nestled among steep cliffs. Mother and daughter then navigated through large rocks, following the winding trail that led out of the forest and up the mountains. The midday sunlight filtered through the tree canopies, casting shimmering patches of light on the dirt path. On her back was a basket full of clams, and in her arms was the obedient Micah, snuggling close to her shoulder. Although her legs were tired from the long journey, Huyen persisted in walking forward, her heart only longing to reach the town soon. Huyen gently took Micah and Appo's hand and slowly walked into the small residential area in the town. The bamboo basket placed on the ground was still full of clams that mother and daughter had struggled to find since early morning. Seeing a woman standing in front of her house, Huyen politely smiled and asked, end quote, "Excuse me, do you want to buy clams? I just caught these this morning and they are very fresh." End quote. After saying that, she gently placed the bamboo basket down for everyone to see more easily. Hearing the call, a few people nearby also curiously approached. Some bent down to look at the clams in the basket, while others asked where Huyen had caught them and how much they cost. Micah stood quietly beside her mother, obediently holding her dress, with big round eyes watching everyone gather around. Huyen always maintained a gentle smile, patiently answering each question and opening the basket for everyone to examine more closely. Huyen and her mother continued to hold hands and weave through the narrow alleys in the town. The bamboo basket in her hand felt a little lighter, but it still contained enough clams to keep selling. When they reached a house, Huyen stopped and politely smiled as she said, end quote, "Excuse me, do you want to buy some clams? I just caught these this morning and they are very fresh." End quote. Hearing the call, the homeowner came out to see. After looking at the number of clams in the basket and asking the price, she happily nodded and agreed to buy some. Huyen gently placed the bamboo basket on the yard, squatted carefully, and scooped each handful of clams into the customer and Appo's bag. She carefully picked and brushed off the remaining grains of sand, trying to prepare everything thoroughly. When the amount was enough, the customer smiled and handed over the money. Huyen received it with both hands and politely said, "Thank you very much, sister. Wishing you and your family good health." Micah, standing beside her, also obediently bowed her head in greeting, making the guest smile affectionately. Then Huyen carefully put the money into her cloth bag, picked up the bamboo basket, and took Micah and Appo's small hand. The mother and daughter continued walking along the village road, stopping at each house to ask about selling clams, hoping to sell the remaining ones before nightfall. Arriving in front of a small house, Huyen saw a little girl standing outside and gently said, "Hey, do you have clams at home? The fresh clams I just caught this morning." The girl curiously stepped closer, looking into the woven basket full of fresh clams. Seeing that her family wanted to buy some, Huyen bent down, opened the basket and carefully selected clean, firm clams with her hands, gently placing them into the bag the girl was holding. While working, Huyen always smiled warmly and asked kindly, "Is this enough, dear? If you need more, I can get more for you." Micah stood beside her, watching her mother work attentively, occasionally glancing into the bag and smiling innocently. After counting the clams, Huyen handed the bag to the girl with both hands and politely thanked her. As soon as she got home, Micah hurriedly hugged the remaining woven basket with a few clams and slowly moved toward the water jar in the front yard. The basket was still a bit heavy for her, but Micah tried her best to hold the handle with both hands, taking each step with a look of determination. After placing the basket down, she took a small basin and carefully arranged the clams inside. Her tiny hands moved very slowly but with great precision, as if she were cherishing a precious item. Then Micah picked up a coconut scoop placed beside the water jar, trying to scoop water into the basin. Sometimes the water splashed over, wetting her small legs, but she just giggled and continued scooping more. When the basin was filled with water, Micah gently washed each clam with her small hands, trying to clean off the mud still clinging to the shells. She washed while attentively watching, occasionally lifting a clam to examine it, and then placing it down very carefully. Huyen sat down in front of the familiar earthen stove, bent down to gather some dry firewood, and lit a fire. Soon the small flame flickered to life. White smoke curled up with the wind, slipping through the simple bamboo roof and blowing directly into Huyen and Appo's face. She gently tilted her head away, but Huyen and Appo's avoided it, so she quickly covered her mouth with her hand and coughed a few times. Huh? After a few coughs, Huyen lightly rubbed her eyes from the spicy smoke and carefully added more firewood to the stove. Her face was dotted with sweat but still radiated calm and focus. Hearing her mother cough, Micah immediately looked up with concern. The girl put down her coconut scoop, ran over softly, and gently tugged at her mother and Appo's shirt, her big eyes as if asking if her mother was okay. Huyen smiled gently, softly patted her child and Appo's head and said, "Mom and Appo's fine, just a little eye strain from the smoke." In the late afternoon, in front of the small bamboo house porch, Huyen and little Micah sat together beside a basin full of clams just brought home. Huyen gently poured in more water, then picked up a clam, carefully scrubbing off the mud on its shell while softly guiding her child. "Micah, look at me. You have to scrub the clams really clean so they taste good when cooked." She carefully washed each one and then showed them to Micah. The girl obediently nodded, using her tiny hands to hold a clam and slowly scrub according to her mother and Appo's instructions. Some still had a lot of mud, but Micah kept scrubbing until she saw the shell looking brighter, then happily placed it into the clean pot beside her. Huyen gently poured water into the pot, added the cleaned clams, and placed it on the burning wood stove. The flickering flames emitted warmth throughout the small kitchen, with the smell of smoke blending with the aroma of dry wood, creating a simple and familiar feeling. While waiting for the clam pot to boil, she carried the hot water kettle she had just boiled and carefully poured it into Micah and Appo's bath basin. Huyen tested the temperature with her hand, and when the water was just warm, she smiled and called the child over. Huyen gently lifted Micah into the warm water basin she had prepared. She laid the child on her back in her arms, one hand supporting the head, and the other carefully scooped small amounts of water to wet the child and Appo's soft hair. Huyen gently massaged her hair and carefully washed her hair, softly stroking the strands that fell on her forehead. Micah closed her eyes obediently, occasionally giggling as the warm water flowed over her cheeks. After washing her hair, Huyen continued to bathe her child, gently scrubbing the small hands and tiny feet, then rinsing carefully. After drying her off, she carried Micah into the house, took out the clean clothes she had prepared, and carefully dressed her. Once dressed, Micah looked fresh and tidy. The girl hugged her mother and Appo's neck and smiled innocently, making Huyen also smile lovingly and gently kiss her on the forehead before continuing to prepare dinner. The clam pot on the stove was boiling vigorously, with a gentle aroma spreading throughout the small kitchen. Huyen gently lifted the lid, carefully using a bamboo basket to remove all the clams, and then let them cool down. The water used to boil the clams was patiently left to settle so that sand and sediment would sink to the bottom. Then she carefully poured the clear water back into the pot for cooking porridge. When the clams had cooled, Huyen meticulously separated the meat and placed it into a small basin. She rinsed it repeatedly with clean water, gently stirring and carefully picking out any remaining sand. Each time she changed the water, Huyen carefully checked every detail until she was sure the clam meat was completely clean. Then she prepared for the evening porridge for herself and her mother. Place the pot on the blazing fire and add some oil to sauté the shallots until fragrant. Gently add the cleaned clam guts and stir well, then season with a little fish sauce and spices to taste. When the clams just tighten, Huyen pours everything into the previously prepared clam boiling water, adds a little washed rice, and puts it on the stove to cook porridge. The gentle flame emits warmth throughout the small bamboo house, with the aroma of sautéed shallots blending with the sweet scent of clams spreading throughout the kitchen. Huyen gently lifts the dog Pippi out to the small ditch in front of the house to bathe. She scoops clear water with a cup and pours it over Pippi and Appo's muddy fur, then gently rubs all over its body with her hands, causing the obedient dog to stand still, occasionally wagging its tail happily. Little Micah stands beside her, watching her care for Pippi, her eyes shining with delight. The girl runs over quickly, sits close to the edge of the ditch, and gently pats the dog and Appo's head with her tiny hand, giggling softly and calling and quote, "Good boy, Pippi," end quote. The peaceful space in front of the small house suddenly becomes lively with Micah and Appo's clear laughter and the trickling sound of water under the gentle sunlight. After taking a bath, Huyen gently carried Pippi back into the house. She placed the small dog on the wooden chair in front of the porch, then took a soft dry towel to carefully dry each part of its still wet fur. Huyen and Appo's hands slowly massaged Pippi all over, while she dried and stroked to keep the dog from getting cold. Pippi obediently sat still, occasionally shaking its head slightly, causing tiny water droplets to splash everywhere, making Micah giggle beside her. Once dry, Pippi and Appo's fur became fluffy and clean, and the little dog happily wagged its tail, running around the two mother and child as if to thank Huyen for her loving care. Huyen carried a coconut bowl and stepped out to the small ditch in front of the house to take a bath. She gently sat on a brick near the water and Appo's edge, her hair falling down before using the bowl to scoop clear water. Each splash of water was poured from her hair down, flowing along her shoulders and back, creating gentle ripples on the calm surface of the ditch. Amidst the reeds and lush green trees, everything was silent, only the soft sound of water dripping and a gentle breeze blowing through, bringing a rustic, peaceful feeling of the countryside. Suddenly, from afar on the other side of the quiet ditch, a strange figure appeared faintly. The person walked slowly, sometimes hiding behind tall grass, sometimes peeking out cautiously, with a sneaky and wary demeanor as if trying to avoid being detected. Occasionally, the figure stopped, glanced toward Huyen, then bent low and continued walking, making the peaceful scene suddenly tense and full of mystery. Huyen was still sitting quietly by the edge of the ditch, using a coconut shell to scoop water and pour it over her hair, completely unaware that on the other side, behind the thick bushes, a stranger was secretly hiding. He deliberately concealed himself, only faintly visible behind the trees and reeds, silently spying with malicious intent. The seemingly peaceful scene suddenly became tense. The silence of the ditch only heightened the feeling of unease, as Huyen continued bathing innocently, unaware that she was being secretly watched by a pervert from across the bank. A stranger silently moved to another position, sneaking behind the thick bushes with the intention of getting a clearer view. Every gesture of his was full of stealth and suspicion. At that moment, Pippi the dog, lying in the front yard, suddenly perked up, directed his gaze toward the other side, and barked loudly and continuously. The rapid barking shattered the quiet of the afternoon, causing nearby birds to startle and fly away. But Huyen still had no idea what was happening. Thinking that Pippi was just barking randomly as usual, she turned to look at the dog and gently said, end quote, "Good boy, Pippi, go inside," end quote. Hearing her call, Pippi hesitated, standing still, eyes fixed on the other side, and softly growled a few more times as if signaling something. Only when Huyen called again did he reluctantly move toward the yard. But he kept glancing back at the suspicious figure hiding behind the bushes. Pippi suddenly barked more and more fiercely, the barking echoing throughout the small yard. The dog stood upright, ears perked, eyes fixed intently on the other side of the ditch, continuously growling as if warning something. Hidden behind the thick bushes, the pervert was startled and panicked. He quickly bent down and moved to another spot, trying to hide his presence. At that moment, Huyen stopped because of Pippi and Appo's unusual behavior. She turned her head to look in the direction of the barking, and caught a glimpse of a faint stranger on the other side. In a flash, Huyen was startled, quickly pulled her shirt up to cover herself, and stood up abruptly. Her voice, both cautious and firm, rang out in the quiet space. "Who is that? Who is on the other side?" The sudden call made the figure pause for a moment. No longer daring to stand secretly, the suspicious person immediately turned around, slipped through the dense bushes and hurriedly left, leaving only the swaying grass and the sound of footsteps fading away. Pippi still stood in the yard barking non-stop, as if determined not to let strangers come back near Huyen and Micah and Appo's house. Huyen suddenly felt her heart pounding rapidly, her hands trembling with fear. Not daring to linger for another second, she hurriedly embraced Micah and ran quickly towards the small house. Pippi also immediately ran closely beside her, occasionally turning her head to look towards the canal and barking a few more alert barks. As soon as she entered, Huyen quickly closed the door and securely locked it. She quickly changed into dry clothes, but her face still looked pale from the shock. After changing, Huyen sat down in the corner of the house, holding Micah tightly in her arms as if to protect her from all external dangers. Micah looked at her mother in confusion, then wrapped her small arms around Huyen's neck. Pippi lay right in front of the door, her ears upright, eyes always looking outside, silently watching. Inside the small bamboo house, only Huyen's hurried breathing and the tense silence remained, as she was still overwhelmed by what had just happened. "My hands are still trembling slightly." Huyen took the oil lamp placed on the wooden table and lit it. The small flame flickered and gradually brightened, casting a faint yellow light that filled the simple bamboo house. She carried Micah to the bed and held her tightly in her arms. Baby Micah, sensing her mother and Appo's unusual behavior, obediently rested her head on Huyen and Appo's shoulder, no longer playing like usual. Huyen and Appo's eyes constantly looked toward the door and the small window. She gently pushed aside the old curtain, nervously peering outside into the yard, trying to see if the strange figure from earlier was still lurking around the house. Only the chirping of insects and the swaying of the trees in the wind made her even more uneasy. Pippi also refused to stay still. The small dog stood close to the door, ears perked up, attentively listening to every tiny sound from outside. Every time she heard the rustling of leaves, Huyen instinctively tightened her arms around Micah, silently hoping that the stranger had truly left and that tonight would pass peacefully. After sitting for a while, holding Micah in her arms, Huyen still Huyen and Appo's shake the feeling of unease. She kept thinking about the strange figure that appeared on the other side of the ditch. After many internal struggles, she decided to check if there was anything suspicious around the house. Huyen gently placed Micah on the bed, and because she was still worried, she instinctively wrapped her arms tightly around her chest, took a deep breath and slowly opened the door slightly. Huyen carefully took each step, her eyes constantly scanning the yard, the bamboo fence, and the bushes near the ditch. Every rustling of leaves or sound of insects made her startle and look back. Pippi stayed close to her owner, always alert with ears upright, attentively observing the surroundings. The scene before her was just the quiet night and the swaying trees in the wind. Huyen still dared not be complacent, quietly standing and observing for a long time to be sure that no one was lurking around the house of the mother and child. After observing carefully for a while and being sure that no one was lingering around the house, Huyen let out a gentle sigh of relief. She closed the door carefully and went back inside. The oil lamp still flickered on the small table. Huyen gently tidied up the bamboo table, wiped the surface clean, and then carried the steaming clam porridge from the stove and placed it down. The aroma of the porridge spread throughout the small house, somewhat alleviating the tense feeling she had just experienced. She carried Micah to sit beside the table, scooping 2 bowls of steaming porridge. Huyen carefully stirred the porridge with a spoon to cool it down, then fed Micah small spoonfuls, blowing on each one gently. The girl obediently opened her mouth, eating each fragrant sweet spoonful, her clear eyes looking at her mother with innocence. Occasionally, Huyen would take a spoonful for herself, but her gaze still unconsciously drifted toward the door, as if still worried. Pippi lay quietly beside the foot of the table, vigilantly watching. Inside the small bamboo house, the simple dinner for mother and daughter took place in the warm glow of oil lamps and the peacefulness that Huyen wished to preserve forever. After finishing her meal, Huyen quietly tidied up the dishes, washed them clean, and neatly placed them in the corner of the kitchen. Huyen gently lifted Micah onto the small bamboo bed. Then she took the conical hat and sat beside her, slowly fanning cool breezes for her child. Under the flickering oil lamp, the shadows of mother and daughter stretched long on the bamboo wall. Huyen softly fanned the hat while singing a gentle, warm lullaby. The soft singing blended with the sounds of insects outside at night, creating a peaceful scene inside the small house. Micah gradually closed her eyes, her tiny face relaxing before falling into a deep sleep. Huyen still sat there, gently fanning with one hand and stroking her daughter and Appo's hair with the other, occasionally glancing toward the door as if still worried about what happened earlier that afternoon. But seeing her daughter peacefully asleep in her arms, her eyes gradually softened, and she only wished for the night to pass peacefully. Huyen still cannot fully feel at ease. She gently took the oil lamp, softly opened the door, and stepped outside into the yard. The small flickering flame inside the lamp cast faint yellow streaks of light onto the ground and the bamboo fence in front of the house. She slowly moved the lamp to illuminate each corner of the yard, every bush, and followed the narrow path, carefully inspecting potential hiding spots. Every step was cautious, her eyes constantly observing the surroundings to ensure no unfamiliar shadows were lurking near the house. After a thorough check without detecting anything unusual, Huyen let out a gentle sigh of relief. She returned inside, carefully closed the bamboo door, and secured the latch. Placing the oil lamp on the corner of the table, Huyen went back to the bed. In the flickering light, she still held her child in her arms, listening to the insects outside in the darkness, until exhaustion made her eyes gradually close and the small house fell into peaceful sleep. As the night deepens, the oil lamp inside the small bamboo house flickers with a warm glow. Outside, the sound of insects chirping blends with the gentle breeze passing through the bamboo rows, bringing the tranquility of the countryside. Huyen lies on her side holding Micah in her arms, her hand gently resting on the child and Appo's back as a form of protection. At the end of the bed, Pippi the dog is curled up, sleeping, occasionally shifting slightly before settling back into sleep. After the worries and unease of the afternoon, The small house finally falls into silence. The oil lamp gradually dims, leaving the shadows of mother and daughter faintly reflected on the bamboo wall. A long day ends in fragile yet warm peace, as the mother only wishes her daughter a good sleep and a safer tomorrow. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Apos, mother and daughter, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.